Well, I would really like to thank the president and the administration, faculty and staff, and the dear student body here for inviting me to come and giving me a wonderful time. I love this campus. And those of you that are here for Scholars Week would be silly not to come here. This is a really good school. I urge you to enroll and take advantage of the different programs that are here. So thank you for your kindness, for your interest, and for letting me be a part of your community this week. Surveys have been taken that indicate that somewhere between 30 and 65% of college students from evangelical churches that go to college lose their faith by the time they're seniors. So now some 30 to 65% of people from evangelical churches who go to college do not believe in Christianity any longer by the time they graduate. Now, something is going wrong here, and I'm sure it's a complicated issue. But one of the issues is that we sometimes tell our young people what to believe without telling them why they believe it. And so they go to a university and they receive criticisms of their religion, and they have no idea at all how to respond or where to go to get answers, or that there even are answers. And one of the reasons for that is that our religion, since about the 1930s, has been viewed as a religion of the heart and not the head. And so I hear regularly at church, we want heart knowledge, not head knowledge. And I'm thinking you can't have heart knowledge without starting with head knowledge. So we are a religion of the heart. We are a religion of blind faith. We are a religion that doesn't value reason. And so that's why our college students, when they're in a place where reason is valued at the university, often don't know what to do with themselves. Now, where do we get this idea? That's a long story, but let me just say that the idea that religion is a matter of feeling in the heart to the exclusion of the head is in the drinking water. It's everywhere. Let me give you an example. The Parade magazine, which comes out in many Sunday newspapers across the country, is read by millions of people. And there's a little column in there by Moreland Savant where you can write in really thoughtful questions, and she will give you her answers to those questions. Well, a few years ago, someone wrote the following question. I'm an adult who likes the religion of my parents. It suits my spiritual needs, but my friends have invited me to explore other religions. Now, what do you think of an adult who unquestioningly accepts the teachings of his parents' religion and does not consider alternatives? Here's what Moreland said. Now, let me tell you what I think of you instead. I think you're smarter than your friends. Religions cannot be proven true intellectually. I'd like to hear an argument for that, by the way. Religions cannot be proven true intellectually. They come from the heart and your parents, not from the mind. In my opinion, you have behaved wisely not to investigate religions because there's really nothing to investigate. So religion is something that is a matter of what you inherit from your parents and your heart. It has absolutely nothing to do with thinking or learning to assess your religion intelligently. Now, what I want to do in the next few minutes is to show you that this idea that religion is a matter of the heart and not the head, and it is in fact both, is a profoundly unbiblical idea. And I want to look at a couple of texts, and the first one I want to look at with you is in 2 Corinthians 10, verses 3 to 5. So if you have a Bible or a device of some kind, if you could turn to 2 Corinthians 10, 3 to 5. Now, 60% of Christians today do not believe in the devil. I will tell you that that is absolute nonsense, because not only did Jesus assure us of the devil, but there have been millions of people the world over who have had encounters with him and with demons. I'm included in that. I've had personal encounters with the demonic. I know the devil's real by personal experience. And I know spiritual warfare is real because there are forces in this world that make things worse in our heads than just our own psychology. They fester things, and that's demonic activity. Now, when we think of fighting demons, we think of laying hands on people and casting a demon out of somebody, and I agree with that. I've done that. I believe in that. But the second most important passage in the New Testament, outside of Ephesians 6, on spiritual warfare is the text that I'm about to show you. And this is an aspect of spiritual warfare that you will not hear from anybody in church. And so let's read it together. Verse 3, for though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh. So Jessup University is not going to form a militia and start training you to fight the local police. For the weapons of our warfare are not like that, but they are divinely powerful for the destruction of what? Now my text says fortresses. So now the question is, if we're engaged in spiritual warfare, we are not simply targeting our efforts against demons themselves, but we are targeting our efforts against fortresses. So what exactly is a fortress? Well, we're told in the next verse, we are destroying speculations and every lofty thought raised up against not the power of God, but the knowledge of God. So a speculation is an idea or a set of ideas. Now, demons are people. They're people. They're not human beings. They're angelic persons. I'm a human person. God is a divine person. Demons are angelic persons. They are persons without bodies. Now, how do people control other people? Well, the answer is that if you can control how they think and feel, you can control them. Now, what that means is then that demons will have a vested interest in establishing the ideas of a culture that people accept and believe. Because if you can get ideas established in a culture that people, just as a matter of a default position, believe that are contrary to the Word of God, you can control those people. And so the battle of ideas that's going on in the culture is not simply between unbelieving atheists and so on and believers, but there is a demonic component. And the reason that UCLA and Stanford and Berkeley have the energy they do is that those schools are filled with demonic activity that goes on in the classrooms of those universities. And I've been in them. I've lectured on 175 university campuses. I have 4 degrees, and I've been in classrooms, so I know what I'm talking about on this. Now, how do you destroy a fortress? Well, you don't ban the book. You don't shout at it or yell at it. You raise arguments against it. You show that it's false. So a fortress might be the claim that you can only believe what science can prove. That's a fortress. Another fortress would be the idea that morality came from evolution and its sole value is to help our species survive, but that there is no objective moral law that's true for everybody. That is a fortress. There are a number of fortresses in the field you're majoring in. Psychology contains a whole bunch of fortresses. Art contains it, history. So when you take up a field of study, there will be a number of things that you will learn from secular thinkers that are good and helpful, because these people are still made in the image of God, and they can give us truth. But there will also be fortress ideas in those texts and those readings. And it's your responsibility as a Christian to learn how to spot the fortresses and how to sift those from the truth in your academic major. Why? Because when you get out, we'd like you to get a job in your field of study and be a Christian in that job. And that doesn't mean witnessing and getting people to come to Christ only. That means thinking like a Christian nurse or Christian businessman or Christian high school teacher, because your job is to destroy fortresses in those settings. And that means learning how to use extra biblical arguments to show the folly of some of those ideas. That, my friends, is spiritual warfare. So William Jessup is not just a school to nurture you, it is a war college. It is training you to be prepared to fight in the world of ideas. You do it graciously and kindly. You don't have to yell or be angry, but you just systematically learn how to take down ideas that are false and harmful to the gospel. That's why when you're in your room studying, that's as much worship as it is when you're singing at chapel, because your study is an act of devoting your mind to God. They're very important. Now, I want to show you another example of this, the importance of the mind. If you would turn to Matthew 22. Oh, yes, you must see this. This is an absolutely fascinating text. We have misunderstood Jesus, in my opinion. We think of Jesus as a real kind of down-to-earth blue-collar worker who kind of was a 60s guy. He had a VW van, and, he'd float around and drive into town and, and go, whoa, dude, and drop little one-liners on people. And then he'd split, and that's kind of the way we think of him. Well, my parents were blue-collar workers, and Jesus was indeed quite comfortable with the lower classes and the blue-collar folk. But we dare not think that Jesus Christ was not also comfortable with the university professors of his day. Case in point, we've been sending missionaries to India to work with the lower classes for a long time, but we've not been sending missionaries to India to work with the judges and the engineers and the university professors. And in our philosophy program at Talbot, we've sent 2 guys over there now, and they're having a massive impact lecturing to lawyers, to university communities, and to the upper tier intellectual leadership of India, and are winning a number of them to Christ. You think that's unimportant? No, that's a big deal. It's an important thing. And Jesus Christ, whom I think was the smartest man who ever lived, is in a situation here where there are Stanford and Berkeley professors that are arguing about a topic, and their graduate students are there. It's a colloquium lecture, and the Stanford humanities profs have brought their grad students, and the Berkeley profs have brought their grad students, and they're against one another on something. And so they think that they're going to bring this uncredentialed, itinerant preacher who didn't get a PhD under them, so he doesn't have a certified degree under the Pharisaic or Sadducees mode of teaching. He just sprang up out of nowhere. And they think that they're going to ask him a question and show how stupid he is. And so the Sadducees, who don't believe in life after death, come up to Jesus, and they raise a reductio ad absurdum argument against him. And he knows what a reductio ad absurdum argument is, and he knows how to defeat it. A reductio ad absurdum argument is an argument where you start by assuming your opponent's view is true, then you deduce from that a contradiction, and since your opponent's view, if true, leads to a contradiction, it turns out your opponent's view has got to be false. And so they say to Jesus, hey, you believe in life after death? All right, what do you do with this? Here's a woman, and she was married, and her husband dies. And Moses says that she can marry his brother, and he dies, and so on until she's married 7 brothers in a row. What is she feeding these guys, I'm thinking? But that's a whole different sort of thing. But then finally she dies and goes to heaven. And, okay, Jesus, here she is in heaven with these 7 brothers. To whom is she married? And you only got 2 options. You can say she's married only to one of them, probably the first one, in which case God, through Moses, sanctions adultery with the other 6 brothers. You like adultery, Jesus? Okay, then you probably ought to go the other alternative and say she's married to all 7 of them in heaven, in which case God, through Moses, sanctions polygamy. Now, which do you like, adultery or polygamy? If you don't like either one of them, then belief in life after death has led to a contradiction, namely that God would command an evil thing, and therefore you have to abandon belief in life after death. Now, Jesus didn't say to him, oh, you know what, I just want you to know how God has changed my life. And, I used to be this way, but now, I'm really different, and he means so much. Oh, how he loves me. Now look, I absolutely believe in all that. But if you're giving your testimony 10 years after you became a Christian, something's wrong with you. Because that's what you start doing, but later you ought to grow up and learn to say a little bit more than your life has changed. Is it okay if I tell you that? Okay. I've been wrong, and my wife reminds me that on a regular basis. And it could be wrong on that. So what Jesus says to them is, and this is really funny, remember, these are the intellectual leaders of his day, and he says, you're mistaken and you don't understand the Bible. They studied the Bible every stinking day. And he's saying, you don't understand the Bible. He said, your problem is that you've given me 2 options, but that is a false dilemma. There's a third option that you haven't mentioned. And that third option is the fact that there is no marriage in heaven. Since there's no marriage in heaven, I don't have to face either the adultery question or the polygamy question, and your argument no longer has any force. So with one statement, he robs the argument of force. And then he decides, just for the fun of it, that he'll ask a question. And so he says, but regarding the resurrection of the dead or the afterlife, haven't you read what was spoken to you by God, saying, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living. Now, when he says, haven't you read, he's toying with them because this is one of the key verses that was a part of the Sadducees' party platform. This was a major verse of theirs. And what he's going to do is show that one of their major verses proves their own views are wrong. Now, if you can do that's not bad. And basically what he says is that the text says, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. If your view is true, and Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob lived and died and no longer existed, then the text should have said, I was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Just like I would say to you, I was a student at the University of Missouri, my undergrad training. I wouldn't say I am a student because that happened in the past and it's over with, right? But the text doesn't say that. It says, I am now, or I continue to be the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And the only way he can continue to be their God is if they continue to be. Which means that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are alive in the afterlife. Now, when you stop to think about this, you begin to realize that Jesus Christ was not only comfortable with farmers and folk that we would call today were blue-collar workers, but he was very, very comfortable in academic circles dealing with the intellectuals of his day. Now, I remember years ago when Ronald Reagan became president that he called James Dobson and Bill Bright and a number of other major evangelical leaders and said, I want to put evangelicals on my cabinet. Can you recommend any? And Bill Bright came into a meeting that I was a part of and said, the embarrassing thing that we had to tell President Reagan is that there weren't any evangelicals qualified to be on his cabinet except C. Everett Koop. And he became the Surgeon General. Now, what was embarrassing about that was that our community was producing good public speakers that could build churches of 5,000 to 7,000 folks on the basis of their powerful ability to give interesting talks. We were producing good music. Christian music today, in my view, is every bit as good as secular music. It's good stuff, and both of those are fine, but we weren't producing people who can think. So if you look at CNN or Fox News, and they invite an evangelical leader to address an issue, it will be a large Bible church pastor that's very well known, or it will be a famous person that's in head of a ministry like Franklin Graham. And these are wonderful men of God doing a good work, but they're not the kind of people that you want to have on a show that's answering a question put to them. And the reason that we turn to Franklin Graham or large Bible church pastors is because what we value in our community and what we produce are powerful public speakers that don't know anything. Forgive me for saying that. But by and large, Rick Warren is an exception. I know Rick, and he's an exception. But by and large, the people that are in leadership in the evangelical community do not know how to address the issues of our day. And what Franklin Graham, God bless his heart, ought to do is have a list of Christian scholars that address different issues. And when he gets called to go on Fox News, say, "Thank you for asking. I've got just the guy for you." Now, what I want to say to you in closing is I am tired of being embarrassed to be a Christian. Now, in my real life, I'm not embarrassed to be a Christian. I'm proud as punch to be a Christian, and I will tell anybody... I'll tell anybody who asks me, "Are you a Christian?" And I will say, absolutely. I may be dumb, but I'm not stupid. And can you imagine following anybody but Jesus? I can't. But what I am embarrassed about is that our community just hasn't grown up. We just don't have a community that can think its way out of a paper bag. And in my own church, I've tried to generate discussions about issues, and people start looking at you like you're being nosy. And so what we want is comfort and strength as Christians, but we don't want to learn how to engage the culture because that requires turning the TV off and reading. So I'm being dead serious with you. I'm not angry. I'm embarrassed by that. It's time for us to change. Our brothers and sisters in previous generations weren't like this. They sang, Watts, who was a hymn writer, also wrote 2 books on logic that I have at home. He wrote logic texts and he wrote hymns, and he thought they were both crucial to the worship of God. You ever heard that? So I challenge you while you're in college like that, you don't know how lucky you are, because you're at a school where you have trained faculty members who know what they're talking about. Bring your questions to them. If you're majoring in something, ask them, what are the strongholds in this field of study that are contrary to the Bible that I need to learn to take down? And learn how to do it while you're here, because you're not going to be encouraged to do it when you get out of here. What I want you to be is someone who encourages others to do it. The bottom line is we need to love God not only with our whole heart and soul, but also with our whole mind. Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.